some amazing things to share with you. Or if you have to leave early, the recording will also be available for you. So yeah, you're the Reimagining Care TGNC mutual aid models. A quick overview for the folks who are joining us. We're gonna just share a little bit about GGLA. We're gonna go through an icebreaker, define what is mutual aid, break out into an activity, so into small groups. We'll come back with some GGLA sample models of mutual aid that has worked for us and that we've been doing for this past 20 years. And then have a moment to just decompress and to share questions or comments that we have from the session or amongst each other. And then we are closing it off so that we can move on to the next session and the incredible lineup of activities the rest of the day as part of this convening. And I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Isaac.
Thanks, Sonia. Hello, everyone. Isaac here, and I'm just going to start us off with the land acknowledgement. It's practice of Gender Justice LA. We understand that not everyone uses this practice for various reasons, and I think for us it's following Indigenous leadership locally. And so with that, we wanted to just take this time to really honor the lands that we're on and wherever the land that you're on right now. For us, Gender Justice LA is located on Tongva land, also in the surrounding areas, Chumash, Tataviam peoples, and the La Jolla Band of Mission Indians, and so on. And we want to really honor the original caretakers of this land as traditional caretakers, as ancestors that have taken care of the lands before. Many folks have resided on it. So we understand that Indigenous struggles is an ongoing thing, understanding that colonization exists and that many signs and names of places and animals and resources have been changed and due to colonization. And so we want to just recognize that and understand that and encourage folks to find the actual names for the signs and the places that you live. And so recognize that our siblings and comrades in solidarity with community building around Indigenous peoples and issues surrounding environmental justice and Indigenous issues overall, and understanding that it takes multiple people to really understand how to support. And so we really encourage folks to not only do your own research but also to follow Indigenous leadership, and as well as understanding the land that you're on. And we're going to drop a link in the chat, and so we encourage you to do this wherever you are if you're traveling, and to continue to learn more. And on top of that, we really want to honor Black TGNC folks, and also recognizing Black Indigenous TGNC elders, Two-Spirit elders, cultural workers, organizers, and whatever language that folks have had relative to their tribal affiliations. And so we also know that like a lot of Black and TGNC folks are often forgotten or erased throughout history. And so it's really important for us to bring that up and to honor them as well. Thank you. Next slide. So we wanted to let you know, if you don't know who we are actually Gender Justice LA. We are a grassroots organization that has been organizing in Los Angeles, Tongva land for over 20 years. And we have a long history and legacy of people coming in and out of the organization to make it what it is today. And so we also wanted to acknowledge that. So Gender Justice LA, we make concrete changes for racial, gender, and economic justice. We are committed to developing community responses to violence, as well as healing from past and present historical trauma. And so we do this through organizing, leadership development, and really relational organizing, which is building community and real relationships at the core, and focusing on wellness, right? As well as policy advocacy, in order to build the collective power of our overall community, right? So not just the TGNC people, but the folks who are fighting for our issues as well. And we are 100% by and for gender nonconforming, non-binary, gender expansive, two-spirit, Black, Indigenous, trans people of color. So here we are, and we're excited to share this workshop with you all today. All right, and I can start us off with who our presenters are today. I'll start with myself, and then I'll pass it along to Sonia. My name is Isaac, once again, they, them pronouns, or he, him, and today I am wearing a yellow shirt. It's like a yellow mustard shirt with a black vest. And I have glasses on, brown skin, and brownish, blackish hair with a little bit of gray swiggling throughout. And I also, I think I said I'm wearing glasses, and I have a brick wall behind me. And yeah, I think that is it. Now I'm going to pass it on over to Sonia.
Thank you so much, Isaac, for that. Hi, everyone. My name is Sonia. I go by they, them pronouns. I'm also the programs director at Gender Justice LA. On the slide, I'm the person with a bow cut, black bow cut. I have this like over the shoulder yellow dress, and the background is like greenery with some like wood. I don't know what it is, like stand that holds the plants up. And then on camera today, I have the bow cut has been cut. So I have smaller black hair, brown. I'm wearing the same earrings. So they're circular, round, colorful earrings. And I'm wearing a t-shirt that a white t-shirt, and the background is also white. And I'm super excited to be here with you all. And I'll pass it over to my fabulous colleague, Camila.
Hi, folks. My name is Camila Cameleon. My pronouns are she, her, and ella. I am the one with the red velvet background and yellow and orange spotted shirt. Currently, I'm wearing a black t-shirt with a gradient heart of a rainbow and long black hair. I'm excited to be here with you all today, and I'm also a staff member with Gender Justice LA. I'm the current administrative coordinator and on my second year of the Alpha Mental Health TGI Task Force with this amazing team. I'll pass it over to our newest colleague, Sydney.
Hi everyone, my name is Sydney Brown. My pronouns are they, them, theirs, and I am a member of the research advisory team as well as a research participant with the Transmasculine Health Justice LA project that's also held by Gender Justice LA. I'm currently wearing a white button down. I have a beard, identify as a Black transmasculine genderqueer boy, and I'm excited to be with y'all today, and I will pass it over to Candace.
Sydney, Candex, Dex or Dexy, he, him pronouns. I'm an Asian, Indigenous, non-binary person. On the image in the screen, I'm standing outside. My hair is bluer in there. It's black now. I essentially have the same haircut. It's shorter on top, and it has like some like extra tiers. My hair actually is quite long. In the image, I'm standing outside in front of the sky and some greenery. I'm wearing a white structured cardigan. Today I'm wearing a blue shirt with a screen printed bunny on it. I don't know if you can see it. And I'm sitting in front of like what you can see is the ceiling. So, and I'm a TGI Task Force lead. Our other colleague Lillian isn't here with us today, so I think that's us.
Thank you so much, Candex. And I'm gonna pass it over to Camila.
Hi, folks. Good morning, and good morning. We're gonna do a quick energizer to start off our session. Our session will go until about the 11:35 hour, so we'll be here for a couple more minutes. For the energizer today, it's gonna be via the chat function just to kind of get us revved up and amped up. And so with that, we'll be sharing our names, our pronouns. If you can share where you're joining us from, you can share either county or location, whatever you feel comfortable, or if you just want to share, I'm in a house or I'm at a park, I'm currently on commute, responding safely, feel free to share so. Or the alternative would be, if you would like, you can also share your horoscope sign. So it would be your sun sign, so just your sun sign at the moment. And if anyone would like to start, feel free to start putting those in the chat box and we can begin to share. Kitai for the introduction, coming in from Humboldt County area. We have Scorpio in the house. Woo-hoo, your season's coming up. Sagittarius as well, coming up. I'll share mine. And for the speakers, if you can also share yours in the chat box, that would be awesome.
I also stopped sharing like the screen so we can all see our lovely faces or our photo icon if you're off camera, just so that we can be in community and see all the amazing 30 folks who are in this session. So we'll give another couple of minutes for folks to type in.
And thank you, Sonia, for using the word icon, because some of these photos are iconic, you all. I love it. We have some Geminis in the house, some Cancers, folks from Tongva land, at least one Libra and one Virgo, Sagittarius. We have folks from Yakut land. We have an Aquarius. Woo-hoo. Leo's in the house. We have the IE representing here. Hi, Rainbow Pride Youth Alliance as well. Hello, Jaden, Leo Sun. Hello, Simone, Sagittarius, joining from Stockton. And then just a access note, please note that there is ASL interpreting happening. If you would like, feel free to click the 3 dots on the right side of them and pin them if you need ASL interpreting throughout the entirety of the presentation. We have Aries in the house. Some Libras. Yes, thank you all so much for sharing today. And so as you can see, we have folks from all over California, all over the 12 signs. And so really just acknowledging that out of the 30 people here, there's going to be a magical session around TGNC mutual aid models. So we'll go ahead and go back to the presentation so we can continue moving forward. Thank you all for sharing your sun sign, your location where you're from, and also your name and pronouns, and sending sparkles your way. We'll pass it over to Sonia.
Thank you so much, Camila. And talking about sparkles, in the slide, you'll see a photo of Camila taking down some notes from a past retreat that we were part of with our former colleague, Zen. So just like, lifting up the beautiful image that we have on the slide. So as part of this mutual aid session, we wanted to go a little bit over what is like mutual aid. I know that it's like loaded, and sometimes we see that word or concept like floating around and we're like, what is it? So on a most defined way, we wanted to lift up Dean Spade's definition that comes from their book, Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. So mutual aid is a collective coordination to meet each other's needs, usually from an awareness that the systems we have in place are not going to meet them. So just wanted to put that, if you want to screenshot that, or if you want to get the book, this is the definition that came from it. And I want to expand a little bit on that. So I like to frame mutual aid as it is a voluntary practice, is a participatory and consensual, like coming together of community members. It is mutual aid as in solidarity and not charity. meaning we're always lifting up people's agencies and input. So if they're benefiting from mutual aid, or we're organizing or coming together as community to show up for their needs, we're at all process of this mutual aid project, we're lifting up people's agencies and input, and thoughts, and boundaries throughout the process. We also like to frame mutual aid as reciprocal, noting that at any moment we're part of this ecosystem, and that in one way we may be putting, working on a mutual aid process, benefiting one community, and then next week or the following year, it can also be, and the other way around, that person may also uh, be part of a mutual aid process. So it's not just like one specific, one directional. Um, we also see mutual aid as this like rapid response or disaster aid. So a good example might be with Hurricane Sandy. I'm from New York City, and so I saw mutual aid in the way folks were showing up for each other during like a hurricane season, when people needed access to clean water and food and shelter, but also thinking through a disaster aid framework of COVID-19, as people were showing up to provide support in navigating testing, getting access to vaccination, to even like PPE material. So thinking through that, and also thinking of mutual aid as disaster aid during like political urgency and political disaster, such as like Roe versus Wade, as so many folks, especially in the southern states, organizing and creating mutual aid frameworks to support other folks who may need access to Plan B or access to abortions. So thinking in those models as well. Mutual aid as also as decentralizing, and this being a horizontal effort. So thinking that, again, like thinking of a ecosystem where everyone is coming together and playing different roles, and understanding that there isn't a hierarchy, and because I'm able to support, doesn't mean that I take on leadership, or that there is dynamics of power within this like a mutual aid framework. And then two last points that I wanted to point out from like thinking of mutual aid is seeing it as intersectional, understanding the systemic forms of oppression and how we may all be impacted by systems differently. So I will use COVID-19 as an example of the way that many folks may experience like the impact of COVID-19 might range based on your zip code. It may base on the area of and community that you're part of. It can also depend on like if you're like a disabled person and having access to certain PPE materials. And so just like understanding that there might be like a big disaster that happens in society, in our country, and noting that people's experience to that may differ. And so mutual aid comes into like address some of those gaps, because we're all experiencing some of these forms of oppression differently. And then lastly, I wanted to frame mutual aid as an sustainable and regenerative, and centering that part of mutual aid is understanding that we care for each other, that at the core values of it is understanding that we're showing up for community, and we're in solidarity with each other. And simultaneously, as we're putting mutual aid projects together, that we're not reciprocating toxic infrastructures that may lead to burned out, or that may lead to conflicting power dynamics. So I wanted to pause there because I know that was a lot, and just wanted like for folks to, if you want to, you can also take a screenshot of this as a reference, and as we continue on through the slides. Yeah, so I'm gonna get us to the next slide. So we wanted to take this moment. I believe that there's a lot of community knowledge here. I know that many of you are familiar with mutual aid frameworks and mutual aid process or projects or initiatives. And so I know we presented to you Dean Spade's like mutual aid definitions and just went through a couple of like different frameworks, but I wanted to take the next 2 minutes. If you can take out paper or your phone or a Google Doc and write down as many descriptive words you can associate with mutual aid. So I'm gonna stop sharing so that I can see you're rushing to get papers or Google Doc. Yeah, just would love for you to just take a moment for the next 2 minutes. Like when you hear mutual aid, like what comes up for you? What are you associating with mutual aid? And I'm gonna give you 2 to 3 minutes, and I'm gonna ask Sydney if you can help us with a song that can get us like visioning and writing down some of these word associations. So yeah, there's no wrong answer. Whatever comes up, it can be in color, it can be in people, it can be in initiatives that you were part of, whatever word association and frameworks you can think of with mutual aid. Thank you so much, Sydney. So what we're gonna move on to do is, there's 27 of us. We're gonna break out into smaller groups so that we can share with each other like some of those word associations, and also like to, as part of like mutual aid effort too, like share out like some of our knowledge that we have of mutual aid or whatever mutual aid means to us with each other. So our lovely coordinator Bryant is going to break us into groups right now. So you'll be like sent over to small group out sessions. And we ask that everybody comes back at 11:15 so that everyone gets at least 2 to 3 minutes to share out with the rest of the folks. But yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for helping facilitate the breakout sessions. Icon. And if you're on camera, if you can describe yourself, starting with what's in the background and what you're wearing and how you made self-described. But yeah, we'll do popcorn style. So feel free. Don't want to put anybody on the spot.
I can start from our group. We talked about the community knowledge sharing that happens amongst trans folks. You know, a lot of us shared that a lot of the information that we had along our gender journeys came from other trans folks. I shared about the like cultural practices for supporting folks during grief and like being able to like for folk like families sharing food and you know coming in and taking care of certain responsibilities when a loved one has passed. That's something I've experienced this year. um, and actually really liked Camila's experience. I know I put you on the spot, Camila, but I love the example that you shared as well of what a form of mutual aid that you support with as well.
Thank you, Sydney. I can share. I shared that I was thinking about like, well, mutual aid doesn't have to be monetary. So I was thinking about how for the TDOR healing event, I did tarot readings and oracle readings for TGI folks. And so I was thinking about like spiritual and maybe non-monetary ways that mutual aid can also be spread. So I specifically read for TGI folks exclusively. And that's like a part of my practice. And it's something that the universe has told me. And so it's just something that I keep near and dear to me, but haven't seen it as a mutual aid effort before, but now it's hitting.
And we can take maybe 3 more folks. And also if you're more comfortable sharing on the Zoom chat, I can also read it out loud.
I can definitely share. Part of me wishes we had more time in our breakout rooms to like really get into everything. But we like my my breakout room sort of had like a complex like relationship with mutual aid. So we're sharing both things where we were associating things like care work and community care, like healing, decarcerality, and like these sort of ideals that we have associated with mutual aid, but also like in experiencing and experiences and practicing and in organizing mutual aid also had more like, I don't know, negative experiences or associations with mutual aid, like stress, like having to be really serious about like capacity boundaries, um, feeling like feelings of like mutual aid being like loaded or petty even, or like having to move past like thinking about post-carcerality or moving past like the ideas of leftist charity. These are things we were talking about, um, as well as like prioritizing, sometimes prioritizing like the academic or like intentions over what is like actually materially happening. And so those were conversations that we were having. And I feel like those are really important conversations to be having when it comes to talking about mutual aid, because also there's also all of these levels of um, conflict and connection that we have, also because as traumatized people, these are things that come up and happen as well, like outside of just even like all of the like concept, right? Which people can also have conflict about as well. So those are things that we're sort of getting into, walked around, and so yeah, that was my breakout room.
Wondering if there's like one more person who would like to share. Also here for the breakout group sessions. Appreciated us into like just having those like real and honest conversations. I'll pass it over to Hector.
Gracias, Sonia. Hector Trinidad Plasencia, they, them, we, us, with Plasencia Consulting. I was with Sandra and Jaden in the group. Sandra made a comment about how she's reading a book and some of the, and actually had her senior thesis on the topic. And I asked, well, what was one of the interesting findings to share? And she mentioned how ego is often the factor that really breaks away mutual aid spaces, mutual aid efforts. And so I thought it was interesting how it's, you know, what we're actually challenging and trying to counter is our ego and breaking down systems and barriers. And it's actually what's also moving us away from our strategies and practices being ineffective. So I think it just speaks to beyond our strategy, our practices, the real practical things. It's really these underlying humane work internally that needs to be done in order for our practices to really be carried out in an effective and impactful way. So yeah, it just made me think of, like, you know, we come up with all these great ideas, all these great strategies, all these beautiful things, and unless the people behind it are have done all their internal work, it's going to impact the outcome of the work itself. Gracias.
I love that drops mic. I think that that's like such a great framework towards like our own like interpersonal and like our own like value center of like why are we showing up for mutual aid projects, or how we're like being part of these like mutual aid initiatives. Yeah, I wanted to, if there's another hands up or another person who's interested, I'm gonna head us over to the next slide. Just wanted to make space and just scan all 23 folks. Okay. Gonna just reshare my screen with you all. So something that we wanted to share with you all was like, what is mutual aid for Gender Justice LA? I know that in the earlier slides, we mentioned how mutual aid comes from like when these systems are not addressing like some of like our community needs, but also like oftentimes we don't want to rely on those systems that have caused us harm. And I'm thinking like different like medical spaces or just like spaces that are meant to be like supporting us even with the best intentions. And I say that sarcastically. Sometimes we don't, like mutual aid comes from the efforts of not wanting to rely on those systems that have been so harmful to our communities. And also mutual aid for Gender Justice LA is models that have always existed in BIPOC communities. And it's not like a new trendy word, or it's not like something that just came out of academia or scholarship. These are practices and frameworks that may not have been defined as mutual aid, but they're very present in our BIPOC communities. Mutual aid can be done in large and small scale. When we see certain mutual aids in our communities, often they are described as this large, grandiose efforts, like big scales, but they can also be small scales, and those are very important as well, even if that's like between 3 people exchanging knowledge about you know, like food access and recipes when you have low spoons. And another thing for us at Gender Justice LA, it does not only have to live on social media, like moving away from like our digital campaigns too. Like these are like mutual aid efforts have been done in community, person to person, house to house. It doesn't only have to live, and it doesn't have to get social media traction for it to be like thought of as mutual aid. And something that Camila brought up earlier is also that mutual aid can go beyond monetary, can be wellness and care access, can be cultural exchange, creative giving. So like tarot card reading to Reiki, to also PPE sharing. So I saw this like at the beginning of the pandemic with COVID-19, where many folks were just like creating masks when they, when there was like a lack and a gap of masks for our communities. And so I remember people sewing and putting things together. And so just like thinking of these forms of also being part of mutual aid, and not as what may be perceived as the only one type of what mutual aid can be. And also thinking from like abundance and not scarcity or competition. And I love what Hector also brought up, which is like moving away from the ego, and thinking that because we're supporting our community or a certain group, that it robs away or takes away from like the materials or the resources that are out there for the rest of us. It's not like there's enough resources out there. So just thinking from an approach that like centers like that we're part of, like, again, this ecosystem and mutual reciprocity, and not from like a scarcity or taking away or robbing. So just wanted like propose some of these things that come up from Gender Justice LA. And I wanted to give some examples of what has happened at Gender Justice LA that we see as mutual aid. And so one of them was a clothing swap that that took place in 2017, and it welcomed like clothes that really focused on like a range of bodies and making sure that we were showing up for each other. And so that was in person. So like a mutual aid can be clothing swap, can be the share of exchange of like material things that that are physical and that we can give to each other. And it was done in like a potluck style. At the next example that I have for you is our COVID-19 rapid response. So just thinking again, like during this like political climate, during like the beginning of the pandemic, the gap and the necessity of our communities when it came to COVID-19, our medical establishments were not addressing the needs of our TGNC communities. The resources were not trickling down to our communities in urgency at the very beginning, and even now with the pandemic. So Gender Justice LA put this spreadsheet together of like multiple resources, from like food banks to like other mutual aid projects and programs and initiatives that were taking place, as well as like where to get your vaccines and your tests. And so that still lives. And one of the things that we continue to do with this, it like lives digitally, but we also try to bring it in person to many of our tabling experiences. So many of our Pride event tablings, we show up with like free PPE materials that we as an organization have been able to get. And we want to make sure that it's like reaching our communities. And so just wanted to show you an example of that. And then lastly, we also like a rapid response at the very beginning of the pandemic as well, of like monetary exchange as well, like providing mutual aid support to our like Black TGNC folks. So there was like social media call out for folks who were needing support, and we created a submission form, and we had over like 60 folks who like submitted to this specific rapid response. And so these are just like a few examples in different formats, one in person, digitally, and also monetarily, that I wanted to share with you all. And then another example, and I think Camila also brought it up, which is like our TDR healing space that we did last year, centering healing and wellness. Again, like moving away from like monetary to like creating a space by us and for us, lifting up the resources that we had and what we wanted to bring for each other, which is like oftentimes in Trans Day of Remembrance, trans folks are asked to share and like be guest speakers about the state violence that is inflicted to our communities and that we're facing. And there hasn't been intentional space for us to just come and grieve together and mourn together and care for each other. And so for us, we wanted to be intentional in creating this healing space. And we collaborated with organizations like Dignity and Power and other community healers, tarot card readers, Reiki, energy healers to make that available for our community free of cost. We also had art making and candle making. And again, we wanted to honor our ancestors, and we created an altar to just like carve out a specific space for us to pay like respect to the folks that we've lost to state violence and who have been murdered. So that's an example of like a end space healing center mutual aid that we did at Gender Justice LA. And so I want to now pass it over to Sydney to talk about it looking as a research project as well, mutual aid as research and knowledge sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Again, this is Sydney, pronouns they, them, theirs. So the transmasculine health research study at LA was born out of this need to really collect data for transmasculine folks, because transmasculine folks were constantly being misgendered, or just data not being acknowledged or being left out of public health interventions. And so what was really special about this project was that it came together to address the community health needs through a research project by and for us. And we asked the questions that we wanted to ask, and not what institutions assumed needed to be asked. So for example, we asked, what were barriers to accessing care? What were some of the experiences, the mental health experiences we were having? What were some of the experiences we were having within these institutions? And what were some of the ways in which we were helping each other? And we did this through our model research justice approach. So making sure that it's grounded in our values that include informed consent, bodily autonomy, accessibility, and racial and economic justice. It was also really cool to be not just the participant, but to go from being a participant to a research advisor. So it wasn't my information being extracted from me, it was my information being used, and also my input being used in analyzing that data and really taking into account what does this data represent, and also having the experiences validated amongst other trans folks in the space, and experiencing community building within that. And so this project was a reflection of mutual aid on a kind of different way, than we think about mutual aid as this form being grounded in research and us really doing the community assessments ourselves rather than relying on academic or medical institutions in exploiting, our information, our blood, our all kinds of samples. We did this for us and by us. And I just wanted to share a quick testimonial on being a recipient of mutual aid at the beginning of the pandemic. I was able to receive cash and condoms and hygiene products, and all of that I needed because I was still in school, I was unemployed, and the school really wasn't doing anything to support us. They literally took $20 off tuition and thought that was going to be helpful. And so what was really beautiful was that I also noticed the immediacy of the response. So it was these mutual aid networks that were reaching out and asking folks, what do you need? How can we send this to you? What's a priority for you right now? I feel like most institutions didn't really do that until maybe 2 or 3 months into the pandemic. And I received these calls for support within weeks of the pandemic starting. So I thought it was a reflection of one inherent community knowledge, like before, the news could say, who was being disproportionately impacted. We already knew that our community was going to be hit the hardest by the pandemic. So we knew that, and we took the initiative to care for each other and acknowledge the agency that we had within each other. And I think that it's a really good opportunity for funders when thinking about ways of reshifting how we engage with giving money. Making sure that we lean and rely on the strategizing that happens within community to direct those resources, rather than giving a lump sum to these big nonprofits, go into the communities and see what communities are already doing for each other and support those efforts in that way, rather than writing a blank check that just goes into the ether somewhere. And so these are some tips on mutual aid. First things is that it's adaptive. Everybody's needs change, society changes, the disasters or community response needs changes all the time. So it's important to be very, very flexible. Also, co-sponsors and collaborators can support in a range of ways. We've mentioned before, it doesn't always have to be monetary. the examples that Sonia shared regarding the things that Gender Justice have done as far as like clothing swaps or even creating just healing spaces for B2B in community with each other, and hold each other and figure out what each other needs in the moment. And also as a reminder that community knows best. So, you know, rely on local knowledge. For example, like if you're a funder in the space, don't assume that you already know what folks need. Listen to the community leaders and gatekeepers to really get an accurate assessment of what's really needed in the moment. And also think beyond just, you know, like organizations that also look at artists and look at culture workers, people who are doing engaging in healing in different kinds of ways, like including tarot card readings or people who draw or do Reiki or provide even peer support or peer counseling for community members. You know, those are also other ways to engage in community mutual aid as well.
I started talking and I didn't realize I was muted. Okay. So now we're moving into this sort of like aftercare of post-mutual aid organizing. I think this is a really important aspect of mutual aid that isn't really talked about, and is something that I want to have as part of like the sort of like continuous conversation, even in the most sort of like typical way of thinking about mutual aid. We think about creating like a digital post, right? And that the organizing that goes around, like for example, raising money for somebody who is in need of aid. When it comes to organizing, even in that very specific aspect that most people are very familiar with, we don't think about what aftercare or like decompression or like having conversation about capacity that shifts like in that process often. So we do, it's like very, very frequent that to sort of jump back to our conversation earlier, where we have experiences of tension, stress, pressure, limited, no conversation around boundaries, where mutual aid can feel like something that ends up being petty, or where we're working with like needs that aren't being met as well. So wanted to remind and like have some reminders about it not being about it being perfect, and also that the best kind of mutual aid also involves this level of care around like who's organizing, um, what it looks like to have like a more supportive structure and structures around like what that care can be and look like. Um, Also as people in communities who, if you are someone who like tends to be a healer or an organizer or like takes on projects to help other people, like being in a process with yourself of like, how much can I actually do right now? Because a lot of us are motivated by shame and urgency in our trauma responses, right? And so these are that piece about healing and inner work that Hector was like talking about earlier is so crucial. Um, so remembering to internally and personally, and also like as a community, reminding ourselves to like rest, reflect, and pause, and also like give each other grace and connection, um, is really, really needed and important in terms of continuing this work in a way that is sustainable. Um, can we get the next slide? All right, so let's give us, I don't think we can do 10 whole minutes because we need to end at 11:50. But I want to lead us through a like really quick breathing exercise to decompress because we have all taken a lot of information and sat here for a long time. Um, so the breathing pattern that I am thinking about is giving us 4 breaths in, holding for 5, and then breathing out for 11. So I'm gonna count us in, but also if this is a pattern of breathing that feels too difficult or inaccessible for you, please go at your own pace. Just the intention is this to slow down so we can move back into our parasympathetic nervous system response, our rest and digest as like part of our nervous system. So we're breathing in for 4, holding, breathing out for 11. Breathing in, holding, breathing out. Breathing in, holding, breathing out. And coming back. Hopefully you feel a little bit more grounded. I know that breathing exercises are something that can be like recommended often, and I know some people feel like resistance and annoyance, but genuinely your breath is so deeply and intrinsically connected to your nervous system and where your trauma lives, and is like a really easy somatic practice that doesn't require a lot of knowledge to practice or do. So hopefully that's helped some people, maybe a little bit. We have now 5 minutes to do a sort of Q&A. If there's anything at all in our presentation that you wanted some like feedback on, had some commentary on, wanted to speak about, or had like we're holding on to something where we didn't have time to talk about it, now is our time to talk about it. I know I also want to acknowledge that the time frame that we were doing this presentation has shifted, and so everybody's sort of like working with that shift as well. So wanted to acknowledge that everybody's doing their best, and I also know that we wanted to get to like respect everybody's time. I know people need to jump back into other meetings. But yeah, so this is that time. If anybody has anything that they wanted to add, feel free to also drop things in the chat if that feels more comfortable or accessible for you. But yeah, feel free to unmute if you would like to. Sonia just dropped our resource guide as well, if you would like to check that out in the chat and have not like are not seeing that. I would just wanted to add a like a verbal cue if anybody would be interested in that. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Candace. Thank you so much, like for like leading us. Candace was also someone who offered like their energy work at the Trans Day of Remembrance. That's how we connected and we met. I know you've been like part of the TGI Task Force, but like I think it was like very important for me as a fellow culture worker to see how we are brought in, like to like just be part of like community and to share out like as much as we can, but also like honor each other's practice in ways that doesn't feel exploitative. So just wanted to honor that. And I think what I wanted to do, I know people are going to exit soon. Just wanted to share this last screen with folks. We love our canvas, you know, we're not like designers, but we try our best. Thank you to everyone, to our ASL interpreters for supporting us today and helping us move through, Brian and Kitty, the tremendous presenters from the TGI Task Force from the Gender Justice LA. If you want to stay involved with us, visit our website, ggla.nationbuilder.com. And we're also on Instagram at Gender Justice LA. That's where we share out information about PPE materials that we have for free or upcoming workshops. We do have our monthly members meeting every second Thursday of the month. So that one is coming up September 8th. If you want to join us, you can visit our website to RVSVP. And also the same link there that says visit bit.ly that /GGLA resource guide. That's also in our Zoom chat for COVID-19 resources and even like reproductive justice resources and monkeypox resources. But thank you, everyone. I hope you have a phenomenal next session. Really appreciate you all for joining us and pivoting with us as we move throughout the day. Yeah, thank you so much to Candace, Camila, Sydney, Isaac, and Lilium as well, who like helped put this information together. And if you want access to the slides, because I know we went fast, please feel free to message me an email to sonia@ggla.org. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
And just a reminder, if you do miss this, the recording will be available on the website later too.